Language dictates how we understand ideas, and how we understand ideas dictates how we see the world. Welcome to this video series called Mental Language Series, where I'll be throwing some light on some very popular sayings that we've just assumed to be true without examining it. And I'll tell you the consequence of assuming this to be true and what we can do from there to have a better outlook. Today we are going to examine the saying you only live once. It's often known as YOLO in popular culture. And the idea of you only live once is to do everything to your heart's desire because at some point of time you're going to be dead. At the surface, it sounds pretty true. There is just one life, and we don't have any experiences of any past lives that we've lived. We don't have any memories of any past lives that we've lived. So it might be easy to conclude this is all that we have. But if we look into the definition of what is a past life, we'll understand better what we mean by past lives. Very often, when people refer to past lives, they're referring to past bodies. So, this is the body you had in this life when you were given birth by your mother, and the next life refers to another body you might assume when this body no longer exists. But I don't believe that is a very accurate definition of a past life. If we see who you were as a kid when you were 2, 3, or 4 years old, and if we examine who you are today as a 15-year-old, or as a 25-year-old, as a 35-year-old, or as a 45-year-old, there is a significant difference in what has happened. You don't have the same interests, hobbies, beliefs you had as you were a kid when you were a kid, and you won't have the same interests, tastes, hobbies, and beliefs as you grow older. So, in some sense, it is quite right to say that you have lived many lives because you're not the same person now, right? So the idea of you living only once is not very accurate, and let's break down what goes into making multiple lives. I would suggest that what goes into making multiple lives is the choices you make. Now, let's start with something as basic as desire, right? Now, let's say you went to one restaurant and you had the food over there and you found it quite delicious. Now, that experience is stored as memory in the brain. And 2 or 3 days later, you may be thinking about the experience you just had. You were thinking about the delicious food that you consumed at that restaurant, and now that thought has surfaced up again. And this gives you the idea to go to that same place again. What has happened here is you have actually been born again as the same person who first visited that restaurant. So, this is the same life repeating itself again, and now you're born again as the same person who visited the restaurant for the first time. If you keep repeating this experience, this is one kind of life that you live again and again and again. So, you've not lived once, you have lived that same experience multiple times. Let's take an example with a job. When you're new to any job that you're doing, there is a certain skill set you need to acquire, and there are a couple of things you need to know. It might take you 6 months or it might take you a year on your job to understand that. But once you get a hold of it, it's quite easy to complete those very tasks with far greater ease than you could do them as a beginner. So you learn all the required skill sets in about a year, and in year 2 or 3, you just needed to replicate the tasks. Now you are living that same life in year 2 and year 3. So you're being born again as the same person in year 2 and year 3. These are the multiple lives you're living as the same person. So there are many ways to live multiple lives through multiple experiences. The YOLO philosophy, however, is geared at repeating the very same experiences again and again and again. So let's say you went to Maldives this year, the next year you would go to Beijing, and the next year you would go to Peru or some other place. But basically what is happening here is you are chasing novelty in some sense. Now the experiences of going to Peru or Beijing or let's say Italy will obviously be different experiences, since all these places are drastically different. But if novelty is all that you care about, you won't really be paying attention to what happened at those places or what experiences that you gathered. It will be living the same life again and again. It will be visiting the same city but with different names and with different places. This is a concept that's a bit hard to wrap around your head because you may not have thought of this quite often. Now, is there a way to live the same experience again and again yet not live the same experience? And I would say yes, it would be your perception. So maybe you go to the same restaurant once more, but instead of paying all your attention to the food that you're receiving, you pay attention to the waiter who comes. You pay attention to the way this waiter interacts with other people. You pay attention to a painting on the wall. You pay attention to the color of the walls. You pay attention to the decor, and then you start asking yourself a couple of things about that. Maybe you speak to the manager, ask him about what was it that caused him to choose a certain painting or a certain wall color. So even though you are in the same situation, the way you are looking at that situation is now drastically changing things, and it's drastically changing your life. So you are not living the same life just once. Now you're living a different life because your outlook on what is happening is absolutely different. With the YOLO philosophy, or the you only live once philosophy, I believe you're living the same experience again and again. So it's fair to say that you're not living once, you're living the same experience multiple times. If you actually want to embrace the YOLO philosophy in its truest sense, that you want to discover as many dimensions there are to life or as many experiences as you can have, given that you have only one life in this body, not only do the nature of your experiences have to change, the nature of your very perception has to change. So even if you are doing the same task day in and day out, if the questions that arise in your mind are different, if you have a different outlook on life, you can escape living the same life again and again, and you can explore different dimensions of your life. So that will give you access to living multiple lives, and that will help you be at peace when the Grim Reaper comes for you, because you'll understand that you had explored life in many different ways. The YOLO philosophy is more about pleasure seeking, if I may say so. And the whole basis of the YOLO philosophy is that novelty in and of itself is bringing something new to your life. That chasing novel experiences is actually enhancing the kind of life you're living, which is not always true. You may go to 10 different bars in your city, but it's essentially the same experience that you're chasing in those 10 different bars. So, the way you want to change your life, if you do not have access to new experiences, is changing your outlook on everyday life and paying more attention to things that you never did. If you start doing this, you will start experiencing that everyday life is not necessarily as monotonous as you thought it was, and from there you will understand how to live new experiences and how to live new lives. Watch this video 2 or 3 times to understand carefully what I've just said. And if you've understood what was said and if you actually put this into practice, let me know in the comments section so that we may share our experiences with the other listeners.